Good evening and welcome to the Monday, September 12 Muscatine School District Board of Education meeting. Madam Secretary, can you please take roll and help us determine the quorum, please?
Directors Connor.
Here.
Cooney.
Here.
DeVee.
Here.
LaRue.
Here.
Morgan.
Here.
Phillips.
Here.
Short.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. Tonight, Muscatine High School varsity football team will lead us into the pledge. Please stand for the pledge. Thank you. That was really great. Thank you. With that, we move into our next item on our agenda, which is the Student School Board Representative Reports. And we have Gabe and Caleb. Would like to welcome you tonight also as you participate for the first time in our board. Thank you.
All right, first I'd like to start with a big welcome to Caleb. It is his first time here with our new representative. So congrats, Caleb, welcome. And also wanted to start with another welcome from the MHS students to our new activities director, Mr. Henson. I know the school year has already started and I'm sure he's gotten a lot of welcomes, but we greatly appreciate him and he's been very involved this school year and we're excited to see where we'll go with him. With that, at the very start of the school year, New Muskie Day went well with help from student council and administration. The students were able to get introduced into the new school building efficiently and effectively with a few minor things here and there. For the most part, they were able to get well adjusted to the high school building, and that was our main goal. With that, the student tours that took place afterwards were also a success. We had a very large turnout from the incoming freshman families, and we were able to show them the building. So once again, I think all those Connect nights for the incoming students definitely have an impact and most definitely help out with the new families. With that, homecoming week is coming up and homecoming court will be announced tomorrow. We are going to have a live stream on the Muscatine High School YouTube channel at 10:10 a.m. in the morning during our enrichment time. So if anyone from the community would like to join in and just take a look at the results, you are more than welcome to. With that, students are taking a little bit of notice in some leaking ceilings, so we were a little bit concerned about that as well. And lastly, the Student News Muskie Minutes recently started, so if the community would like to take a look on that, that was on the Muscatine High School YouTube channel, if you'd like to get an idea of current events and what's going on around the school.
I took some time to get in contact with some of our coaches for fall sports and even some of the players. I spoke to head coach DJ Hawkins of the Muskie football team. As many of you noticed and attended, we had a big win on Friday against Bettendorf, whom we hadn't beaten in 10 years. Hawkins said that the team had a great team effort, and Ty Kozad especially had a great individual effort, rushing for 4 touchdowns and 391 yards, a school rushing record. They will be on the road for the next 2 weeks, playing 2 tough opponents, number 2 ranked Pleasant Valley and top 5 ranked Cedar Falls. Girls swimming, I spoke to head coach Judd Anderson, who is in his 52nd year of girls swim coaching. The team lost many talented swimmers to graduation last season. However, the team is very rich with young talent and is prepared to nurture the competitive program that has been built at MHS. The girls are currently missing Vanessa Calderon, the only senior and team captain, as she works through the tragedy of her mother's, Julie's, passing. Vanessa is a very mature and strong leader for the Muskie swimmers, and we all keep her in our thoughts and prayers. The team is also working to overcome some injuries and sickness as germ seasons set in and their bodies are worn down. I also spoke to head coach Chris Foxon of the boys cross country team. They this year have a very predominantly young team The boys are working very hard at Saturday practices to make progress towards their big meet for the conference championship in October. The boys are bonding really well together. They formed a strong team dynamic. They took second place at the Cedar Rapids Invitational, beating some much larger programs. They are currently working to organize a home meet of which they have not hosted in 10 years. The girls cross country also has a very young team with only one senior, that being Taya Melendez. They're having a hard time getting enough money and enough jerseys for all the runners. Other programs seem to have this struggle as well, including swim team. I was not able to get in contact with volleyball or boys golf, but that is the progress of our Muskie sports.
Thank you, Gabe and Caleb. Anybody has any question for them?
I just want to say thank you and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
How many years did you say for Jed?
What was that?
52 years?
52 years in girls swimming and more for boys.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Great report. Thank you. Well, our next item on the agenda is Citizen Speaks. If anyone in the audience wants to address the board, please step to the podium, state your name and address. You will have 3 minutes to talk. Per our Iowa code, we cannot respond or engage in any discussion. Anybody would like to approach the board? Okay, thank you. So next item is board targets and goals report. Item A, students will graduate prepared for post-secondary options. Item B, Muscatine schools will utilize resources effectively and equitably. And item C, students will learn in a positive and supportive environment. Under this, number 1, we have MHS Student Center presentation, and number 2, professional development updates. So with that, I will go back to you, Clint, and we'll start with number 1.
Yeah, so we'll start with the MHS, the new Student Center. I'm going to invite Brandon Welsh up here. Excited for him and the students to talk about some opportunities that they had as we were renovating the old science wing, because we have the new STEM wing, and creating a new student center there, and the opportunity they had with some staff from Han. So, Brandon?
Yeah, thank you for having us, and we are very excited, hopefully in the next couple weeks, to see the completion of our new student center. And of course, we invite all of you to come check it out, and I will, if you get a hold of me, I'll actually probably line you up with a tour with some of our students who worked on the project if you'd like that. So I've talked about this a little bit before, but this has been a great work-based learning, cooperative learning project that happened last year. Mr. Christopher was in touch with the Han Company and just asked how our students could be involved potentially in this process, and we kind of took off and ran with that. So based upon our information of career interest, we found 11 total students. We divided them into 2 teams based upon some of their career interest, and those range from design to engineering to marketing, finance, and we had some student leadership on there as well. They're going to talk a little bit more about the process there, but the one thing I want to point out is I've been, and I hate to say this, but I'm sure we've all been in a staff-student group where we gather student input and we take that student input and just do what the adults want to do anyway. This was not the case in this situation. I truly feel like they put their stamp on this project, and they were really there from the creation all the way until the end and the final recommendations. It's again was one of the highlights last year of our work-based learning program, and is something that we really hope to replicate moving forward down the road. So representing some of the students that worked on the group, I have Kylie Sawyers and Brendan Steele that are going to tell you a little bit more about the process.
Hi, I'm Kylie Salyers.
I'm Brendan Steele. I was the head of Team 2.
And I'm I was the interior designer of Team 1. These are the students that were participating in this project from each team, and me and Brennan are just here representing them. So, to begin with, the process. In the beginning, we met with the Han group and divided into 2 teams based on career interests, just like Mr. Wells touched on. We started in September of last year, and then our final presentation to Han was in January. We met once or twice a week, and then when we met, we figured out how to send out a student survey to the student body, and then once we got the results, we reviewed them, and then that helped us to make our layouts and finish the designs and figure out what would be best for our students. Through that, we worked with the Han members throughout the year to develop the finished product and our presentations. So these are a few of the surveys that we took. The first one being, what area would you use the most? And we found that most students want a lounge area. And then the top 3 preferences of seating was lounging area. And then we found how important privacy would be to each student in the school. And we found that privacy was somewhat to very important. So we found that most kids just mainly want a spot to study and get their work done in privacy and be comfortable.
There's so many things we've learned from this opportunity, and I just wanted to touch on a few tonight. Everyone can bring something to the table. That's really something that we took and ran with this the program that we had going here. Everyone brought something to the table, whether that was marketing, accounting, other finances, management, interior design was a big one, architecture. Everyone had something that they could bring to the table and ultimately get to where we are today. We also learned that deadlines are deadlines in the real world. You can't say, oh, I forgot it, I'll get it to you next week. Deadlines are deadlines, and we had to keep those deadlines to make sure that we could get our student center done by this fall so that we could all use it this fall too. Also, communication is key. We always had to communicate with each other through the week, whether that was planning our meetings or making sure that everyone was working on the same page, we were all on the same page, getting our stuff done. And also patience. There were times when we had to wait for a response from our supplier to make sure that everything was coming okay, and we would get a little impatient, but we just had to take a step back and wait and trust the process.
So these are the original designs from each group, the Team 1 being the one on the left and then Team 2 being the one on the right. We each just kind of did our own thing, and that's kind of where we began. And then this was the final layout that we came up with Han. So we kind of put the two plans together, and we kind of came up with this with Han. And then those are the final images that we're going off of for the final design.
As I mentioned earlier, we learned a lot of stuff just individually, but as a group, we learned about the accountability in a real world workplace, like I mentioned earlier, with the deadlines and with the communication with each other to make sure everything is actually getting done. We also learned that it is vital for everyone to be communicating with each other. There would be at times when I wouldn't be sure if my team had gotten stuff done because no one ever emailed me or let me know, hey, I finished this. Here's this for you to send to Han. At times like that, we kind of worked through it, and by the end, I feel like we did it very efficiently. And on my point, from a management kind of standpoint, what I was, making sure our team was doing everything, it was very difficult for me to sit back and trust the team, not, realizing that they're all high schoolers and they all have their own outside lives outside of school, and that the stuff would eventually get done and it would get done in time was a big thing for me, just trusting the rest of my team. Kylie, you want to share a little bit about what you learned?
Yeah. So as I was the interior design part of my team, this was something that I really always wanted to do. So after this project, it has encouraged me more to keep going with what I want to do in the future. And so tomorrow I do have a job shadow actually with an architect. So I want to go into architecture and interior design into college. So this project has reassured that for me. So I was really thankful. So thank you, Han, and thank you, Muscatine School Board, for all of the support.
And I'd like to just second that, thank for everyone that has supported this, especially the Han Company. I will say their time, each of these students worked one-on-one with their counterpart at Han. So if someone was interested in finance, they worked sometimes just one-on-one on this project with someone from Han. So their time and their dedication was outstanding. And they also told us that they learned some things from the student perspective for their organization as well. So we hope to replicate that. The other thing we found with that survey, they didn't go into a lot of detail, but we found some things that maybe as a staff or maybe even as students we didn't know. So for instance, we felt like with this new student center, there needs to be a cultural change in the building. So some of the places that we have in the building are great assets to us, but students felt like they were a little bit restricted in what they could do there, or maybe there were some student cultural norms that were established. For instance, seniors, I've kind of marked this seat for the year, and the underclassmen you're not going to be able to use this area for the rest of the year. So we're hoping that we can address some of those cultural norms as well as we move forward with this new student center. But again, we're very excited. The counseling student service offices are also moving right next door. Our student success room and ALC room are also moving next door, and the nurse's office is moving there as well. So very excited for that move.
Can I ask, as in, how many students would be the maximum that would be held in that area at a time?
I think if we go back to the blueprints, if I can, there it is. Each table has room for 6 to 8 people, if not more. 130 was the actual number. 130 from Mr. Castle. I'd say that's a pretty good size for the area and what it used to be used for. We've really changed it into we've truly transformed it into a new space for our students.
So how can students access this? Do they have to have a free period, or they have to have, are they assigned from a teacher, or does the teacher take the kids down there?
We're hoping to make it a little looser than an assigned room. We did create a smart pass system this year, which is a digital layout where students have to request and be accepted into a space. That's kind of the main reason we created that project, so that we can account for every student there. We do not have study halls any longer, so we have freshman success centers, and then there's a few periods where students have free, they would be able to utilize this space. We're hoping also to have core teachers throughout each period man this, so if a student needed to go down, even if it was potentially during a classroom, if they were struggling with a concept and a teacher wanted to release them to go meet with another core teacher to get some one-on-one help, that would be a possibility. We also see utilizing things like FAFSA services, career exploration. If we have military or college visits, we see that being utilized there as well too.
So the core teachers that are there, would they be responsible for supervision then also, or?
We'll have a staff member besides them that's will be in charge of flow coming in and out and supervision.
Looks like a wonderful facility for you guys, so hopefully you'll take advantage of it.
Again, I think it's been a great process. One thing I will also say, the Han staff at first were nervous about working with high school students, and would they show up, would they get things done on time. By the end, they were as excited as students were, and really enjoyed the time. The students did an amazing job. They had 2 proposals, as you can see, and they were both great. So, then we worked with them to kind of merge that together. The Han staff then actually wrote a white paper that they're sharing with others in the industry about how to incorporate students into the process. And again, this is a resource that our students have in this community, unlike any other community, because we have access to Han and those things. So very fortunate with our community support and our corporate support to do that. So I think, again, we're looking forward to getting that space open, getting students in there. It will be a little bit of a change for the high school. But I think it's a good change, especially as we have more students, taking college level courses, or they might be taking an online course and just they have a period in the day where they need to get some work done. And again, we have a system now with the Smart Pass that can still account for them. So it's not a free fall, just show up if you want. And then we're dedicating a staff person there who, will oversee that space. So it'll be exciting. And you guys did a great job.
And I would say, just to add to what Mr. Christopher just mentioned, definitely we are a community to be proud of with all the resources and all the companies and businesses and everybody that lends their hand to help our school system. But also, I would like to thank the two students here, the two leaders, Kylie and Brandon, and please extend our appreciation to your team members too. And Mr. Castle, thank you for also participating and leading the students also into an amazing now place for students to use in the future. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the next item on our agenda is the Superintendent Updates.
We still have the professional development update.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to
Yeah.
turn it over to Joelle and Becky to talk a little bit about some professional development that's coming up.
Yeah.
So we would like to share with you our schedule for professional development this year. So you can see this year we have a total of 5 professional development dates. They are in bold: September, November, January, March, and April. And all of these fall on a Thursday, which is a 2-hour early dismissal, followed by the very next day, which is a full-day teacher in-service day.
Some of the feedback that we received from teachers last year was that they wanted longer periods of time to be able to work together, that the former structure that we had were just short periods, and it just didn't give them enough time to really get into their work. And so that's why the change was made this year. So you can see on Thursday, the teachers will be in their buildings, and they, along with their building leadership team and principal, will be focused on building learning. That was a choice by their staff. The buildings have all selected work around relationships and social emotional support for students. Friday morning, the teachers will come to department and grade level meetings across the district, and we will have continued work in our core instructional practices. Then they'll go to lunch, and then in the afternoon when they come back, teachers will have time to work in planning out taking that social emotional learning and those core instructional practices and really work just on lessons and what that looks like in their classroom. So that will be the structure for our Thursday, Friday. All of you, I believe, Becky put a handout on your desk, and so I wanted just to share. These are core practices that we have been focused on now for 2 years in our district. Buildings, along with their building leadership team, have the opportunity to choose these practices to focus on, and as I stated earlier, all buildings have chosen to continue work around relationships and student engagement.
So our second area of focus is social emotional learning. The Iowa Department of Education adopted the CASEL framework, which you have a handout also at your desk that outline this framework pretty deeply. This is the focus of all SEL work in the state of Iowa. And CASEL stands for Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. So we all know that SEL is a very integral part of human development. So as we continue digging into this work of learning, unwrapping the 5 competencies, which on the wheel, those are the ones that are in orange, yellow, and green. So we will have a dedicated time in teaching these strategies and modeling them intentionally and then infusing these into daily practice and routines. And like Joelle said, this work follows the Thursday, Friday morning, and then intentional time for teachers to put all of this together in the afternoon. So the Friday learning piece is going to be a lot about the why of SEL and how of SEL, along with a deeper understanding of the CASEL framework, and then what's the difference between SEL and SEBH. So they will also learn different strategies that they can be an advocate for within these systems. So that's just kind of a deeper dive into this work for this year. And as you all know, all of what we've been talking about ties into our vision of daily desired experiences. So we know, based on feedback from our students, parents, and staff, that this is an area of focus. And so this year we've intentionally dedicated time for all of this work, and then we can track that through our daily desired experience survey to see how we're doing. Any questions from any of you?
For this CASEL framework, is this what the SEBA leads are being trained in and then utilizing as a resource for staff already?
Yes, the SEBA leads as well with all the other teachers. So we're using the competencies and the standards and unwrapping those standards, as well as the CASEL framework and best practices. So the SEBA leads, in addition, they will be leading some of the professional development, but all teachers will have experience and time this year to do a deeper dive into the SEL, into the CASEL framework.
One of the topics of conversation tonight in our meeting beforehand was communication and how things get communicated properly. And I see here, of course, this whole SEL framework is a wonderful framework. When you get from classroom to schools, how do you perceive getting that really from families to caregivers to the community so that everybody's a part of that?
Right. So our teachers will do a great job of this too. So we will plan intentional time so they can learn strategies, so they can infuse them into their daily lessons, which teaching kids some self-advocacy around self-awareness and being responsible decision makers. So hopefully that communication, our kids will be able to lead some of that. Our building principals from Melk to the high school are working on communicating all of this out in a way that's positive and that shares what exactly is going on. So this year will be a pivotal year in taking SEL and embedding it, and then like you said, Karen, how do we showcase and highlight that this is going on? So there should be evidence when we do classroom walkthroughs that these strategies are being modeled. There should be evidence in teacher lessons, plus they will have time to kind of play around with this and model it for their students as well.
Thank you.
It looks like to me that it's a wonderful program that you guys put together, particularly in the aspect that we have, the last 2 years with the COVID, and I like your core ideas that they really tie into getting students back activated with the teachers and also their co-students. So, thank you for putting in the work.
I would say too, all the building leadership teams, it was interesting because they could choose any of these, and I know last year we started this work, and sometimes there were buildings that changed halfway through based on the needs of kids, and so or their staff, and so for example they might have started under one core instructional practice but then decided, hey, we need to pivot here and focus on this instead, and that was all based on feedback from teachers and students.
And I think, just again to add to this question that Denny's asked here, the core areas, the 5 areas, are you going to cover all of them at the same time, or are you going to work on one piece at a time and move from one piece to the other?
So we will unwrap each one of them one at a time because that is a lot of work, a lot of content. So this first Friday, we're doing a couple strategies that we're teaching teachers. One is called Mix and Mingle. One is called a 60-second relay break. And so this is just an easy strategy to embed at any portion of the day. So to do it all in one shot, that's probably would be a bit overwhelming. I also wanted to add, on Friday, we are including all of our support staff, our building paras, our clerks, food service, maintenance. So the whole entire really Muskie community has an opportunity to come and learn on Friday. So we're very excited about that. The Merrill is hosting this, so we're using their huge upstairs ballroom. So we anticipate about 350 of our Muskie family there learning about what is SEL, and if I'm a media clerk, what does that mean for me when I see students? So just how do I interact? What do I say? What can I do? And things like that. So they're going to have a learning opportunity alongside our teachers. So it really is one gigantic, huge effort. So you talk about communication. Yowza. I mean, that's going to be huge. So we're really excited. And I'm not too sure that we've ever extended an invitation to all of our support staff working alongside our teachers. So other than a super in-service day, this is going to be pretty powerful. So we're pretty excited.
Great, thank you.
What I would go along with that when you're talking about that and with the communication, and I do agree with everything you're saying there, but I go back to then, is how does this support the teachers themselves, as in how they feel the communication then is going with their support staff, and everything? How is that able to, help them to develop some more areas to, because I see that this would be helpful to them, because then they're going to feel good, about how they're working with the students and stuff. But what does that mean for them working with other teachers and their other support staff, the principals and such like that?
Well, I think it gives teachers time to, kind of look at their practices, add tools to their toolbox. I think, being in the classroom and teaching, as a teacher, you're always navigating, are my students able to listen? Are they understanding? Are we a family? We've incorporated morning message. So all classrooms have a morning message. We're a family. When someone is struggling, what do we do as a team of 25? So I think, a little bit of vulnerability with teachers and relating to their students. And I have a feeling that just kind of permeates, because I feel when students come home, they probably share things with their parents. Boy, today was a really good day, and why was it a good day, and things like that. So I think just being aware of these competencies, they're not new. And so when we have been teaching for many, many years, relating to your students, and how do you talk to them, and how do we get through if there's a struggle, and how do we work together in teamwork? So these things that you're looking at, this framework, you've seen these words before. How do we collaboratively work together? Plus, how do we infuse this into our families and our community as well?
Thank you.
And Becky, correct me if I'm wrong, and I may have misunderstood your question, Karen, and I need clarification if I'm wrong with this, but by inviting all of our support staff, they're going to be getting the same information directly, instead of in the past, the way that they would gather that information and be able to pass it on is it would have to come from the teacher's perspective and what they learned in that very short period of time. So the teacher would have become an expert, as much of an expert as you could become in 2 hours, whereas opposed to this time, they'll be getting it directly from the experts who have been doing this for years and years and years, right? Or I've spent a lot more time than 2 hours, that one in service. So by inviting more people in and allowing them to hear and have a voice directly that day and have their questions answered,
And I think
the
it
information
shows a
should be
part of that
better.
community part of it, so they don't feel like they're not part of it. And it's like, oh, we get the lesser version of anything happening in that, because we always want to be able to make sure we're understanding where is that disconnection for the teachers themselves when we're talking about teacher retentions.
Right. And I think too, Karen, you kind of ask, how do we know if it's working? Besides feedback from parents and community, there's a feeling in a classroom and in a building and a culture and a climate. When kids feel safe and when they feel, protected and loved, engagement goes up, student achievement changes, discipline changes. And so these have factors that kind of go in many different areas. So I think it's pretty easy to kind of observe if things are going well in this area, and if not, where do we need to, where do we need to improve, and where do we need supports, and what does that support look like? So, long answer to your question, but
that's
I think it's great, and I think too making awareness is a big thing.
Are we planning on having the support staff be available throughout the entire year, or is it just kind of this first one and let's wait and see?
No, we've been able, on the dates, they are joining us on 3 of the times, the September, March, and April. And they will be joining for a full day, 8:30 to 2:30. And they will be paid for their attendance.
And again, just to go back to our operational plan and what we've been focused on as a district. So last year, a lot of time was spent in planning for this, and so this is kind of implementation. And I think as you look at the alignment of what's happening at a district level, the building, their improvement plans are based on this as well. It ties into our desired daily experiences. It's for all staff. And it really, because of the structure of these days, they have an opportunity to do the learning, work at a grade level or department along that learning, and then they're kind of teacher peer teams on top of that. Then they go right back the next week and can put some of those pieces into practice. They come back the next month, and again, they have the learning, they have the opportunity to work with, like peers, and then they have their PLC teams, and again, right back into practice again. So it's really, I think, a great opportunity for learning for our whole system that I think will have an impact across the whole system.
Do they have any time during their PLCs to implement any of this stuff?
Yeah, the afternoon on Friday will be when they can actually plan what they're going to be doing with their kids. So that Friday afternoon when they come back from lunch, they'll have the whole afternoon just to work on the planning back in their classroom.
All right, I'm going to need to rephrase. So I assume they still have daily PLC time. Is that accurate or not?
Yeah, they do.
And could there a grade level or a department say we want to use some of this time to talk about strategies and implement strategies and evaluate and collect data on those strategies?
Yes. Yeah, they have daily planning time where they
Right.
can choose to work together or independently. Then they also have time after school at the end of the day where they could be involved in doing that.
Too far removed. I don't know how much
That's
things have changed.
Well, and also on the Friday mornings and every grade level and department meeting, there's embedded time at the very beginning at 7:45,
Right.
a welcome and a connector, and then an SEL strategy. And then based on the grade level, whether it's elementary or secondary, elementary is doing, some professional learning on the shifts of reading. Secondary is doing other things. So there's going to be time there and time in the afternoon, as well as when we're not having teacher in-service days during their normal daily schedule. I think that's what you were asking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll ask one more question. And so when Leader in Me and frameworks like that came to the district, there were a lot of community, collaborations that happened with nonprofit organizations or other entities that were serving youth outside of school hours. Will any of that happen with this CASTLE framework so that we can continue to use same languages and strategies when they go home?
Yes. The Leader in Me framework, the language is the same as the CASTLE, being proactive. Well, what does that look like in my schoolwork? What does that look like socially with friends? And so the same vocabulary, the same foundation is there as well. So yes, so it's not just, CASTLE for this, Leader and Me buildings for this, PBIS buildings for this. It's all the same thing. So it is kind of confusing, but it all stems around kids being engaged, and they're in charge of themselves. Yeah.
Well, I believe there were like open house type events too that child care providers could go to, and the district gave us an overview so that there was ability to implement and then continue on with those same tactics too, so that the student didn't have to then readjust when they went into another one and have different expectations. So when Karen was asking about reaching out to parents and getting community engagement so that your SEL framework practices expand into the family, caregivers, and communities, I think if that's part of that path that you're going to take to kind of spread the message further, would just be, I guess, a comment. Maybe not even a question.
No,
Maybe it's a comment.
but when you say with that, it's kind of like when we talk about communications, well, we can say something like, well, you can get it off the internet, we have our stuff all here. Well, sometimes that's not enough. Well, if you can get it from the newspaper, you can get it from there. So from what she's talking about there, then if you've got it from the community and then you've got it from the classroom situation from both areas, you've got then the kids and the families, kind of sandwiched in there, so to speak, where then they get the same message then from everybody. That's what I guess I was going after, and you said that very well then with that.
Any other question? Well, thank you, Becky and Joel. Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you. Yeah. We go back to our agenda and with Clint next.
All right, so just a few things to update everyone tonight. First, I'm going to start with just kind of some high-level enrollment stuff. As we get closer to October 1, we do certified enrollment. We're not there yet, but just to give you an idea, when you look back at last year, and then the projections that were done as we looked at, we know there's going to be some declining enrollment still. That projection was to be about 50 students smaller this year. Right now, with just kind of where we're at as a snapshot, we're about 21 students lower. Now, that can change as weeks go on and kids get dropped. We'll see some fluctuation in that. So we'll bring back overall enrollment to you to talk more specifically about that. What I can tell you is right now, based on where we were previously and based on enrollment projections for this year, our pre-K and kindergarten numbers are up, and that's good. As you know, the birth rates were getting smaller. So for our kindergarten group to be larger right now, that means we have a higher capture rate, which is a good thing. The more capture rate, the better. Our high school enrollment is also significantly higher than what we anticipated. Also keep in mind, high school enrollment over the course of the year does get lower. Kids graduate early, so we will see that drop a little bit. But for right now, we're sitting a little bit better than expected, but we'll keep watching that closely, and we'll report that out to you in October.
Is that any of that have to do with, because you were talking earlier about there are kids that are coming into kindergarten that had not actually previously even been in
Again,
preschool or anything.
that is something we're seeing at the Early Childhood Center and in all of our buildings in kindergarten, where we have, again, one of the kind of the consequences of the pandemic over the last 2 years is we had families who didn't send kids to preschool. And now they're of kindergarten age and they're in the system. So, they may have needs that we weren't aware about. That's the nice thing about our Early Learning Center and our community partners is, if they have learning needs, we can at least anticipate that, provide supports, right? They've socialized, they've learned some of the things that happen when we go to school, right? So when you have kids that are brand new to a school environment, and we're learning their needs, they're learning how school is done, right? So those are things we're watching closely. But again, we know the kids were out there last year. They didn't always show up, at the elementary level. We're seeing some more of those students. So again, in working with our administrators, identifying what do we need in terms of resources, especially over these next couple of years as we see that kind of turn back to a little bit maybe closer to normal. So but good point there. So we'll continue to update you on enrollment. We're watching that closely, but for right now, there are at least some positive indicators there. Also, just wanted to report out on some staff turnover that Jamie Krager, our HR director, shared with me last week that I just want to share again. 2 years ago, at the end of 2021, we had about 14% of our teaching staff that left the district. Could be through retirement, could be going to another district, could be, spouse took another job and they left, so on and so forth. And that felt like a lot at the time. And I remember we had that conversation like, okay, this seems like a lot. National average is 16%. So even for that year, we were a little bit under the national average. But keep in mind that year we also offered a retirement incentive, okay? So last year, that was about 10.7%, so less than it had been 2 years ago. But again, we did not offer a retirement incentive last year. So as we look at, again, the challenges that we've had and that every district has had in terms of hiring staff, had we done a retirement incentive and maybe that number's closer to that 14% again, that's an additional 10 to 12, spaces we're trying to fill right now. So I think in the end that was the right move. But we will be this year as we come back, probably in October, we're going to be talking about another retirement incentive for this year. And part of that is with declining enrollment. It's through some of that attrition that we've been able to. Tom's done a great job and working with you and in the district and managing some budget issues through that. So we will continue that conversation. I can tell you that we're still actively recruiting, opening positions. We have student teachers this year that already right now this fall are going to be interviewed. And we'll be looking to hire them right away before anyone else can get an opportunity to take them from us. And again, that's been a way we've been a little more proactive and try to fill some of those positions. So just a quick update on how we finished that year. Again, a little bit lower, which is good, considering the pool out there. And retirement incentive certainly could be something that had an impact on that, but that is something we'll be talking about again for this year. And then just the last piece, a lot of conversation at the start of the year with attendance. Tonight at our community conversation, some additional conversation around attendance. Again, we sent out some updated information on that. Didn't necessarily change any practices. It just kind of clarified some of those attendance practices. And again, keep in mind that over the past, even prior to COVID, our attendance rates in this district, the percentage of students who are chronically absent, which is missing more than 10% of the school year, was significantly higher than the state and national average. So it has been something we have been trying to work on. And I will say our county attorney, Jim Berry, has done a great job of being a partner with us in that. But again, the goal is not to have people get in trouble or get arrested for attendance. That's not the goal. The goal is really to identify what are the barriers that you're having in getting your child to school and how do we help support you. And in the end, at some point, as we've kind of gone through all of the process, then that last stage is through the county attorney. Those meetings are already happening in terms of talking about students, talking about those, there's been home visits, there's been parent communications. But I can tell you, just in the first few weeks of school, our attendance is better than it was last year. We were at about 92% at this point last year. We're at 95%. Now, is that because of the letter? Hard to say. Is that because COVID's in a different place? Again, we'll continue to monitor that closely. But just to reemphasize that the goal is one of the things we definitely have talked about over the last 2 years is the importance of kids being in school face-to-face in support of their learning. And so working with our parents, working with community partners and ensuring we can help get them there as best we can. The other thing that we monitored last year was staff attendance. And at times we didn't even hit 90% for staff attendance. So right now we're at about 97%. So we're seeing, again, a lot of factors involved in that, but something we're just keeping an eye on. So we're seeing significant improvements both for students and for staff this year. So we'll keep you posted on that as well. With that, any questions for me?
More of a statement, Clint. I think that this will help a lot. I think from an attendance standpoint, I mean, I've done this for a long time, and it really comes down to more how you want to play school. If you want to try to make people compliant, I hope that's not what we're about, but that's what we sometimes try to, it looks like we want you to be compliant, and that's not what it's about. But I think that if we make it more engaging, which I think that this step forward is how do we get kids to be engaged and be interested in wanting to come to school. Instead of trying to figure out why they're not, let's make it so that they do want to come. And not focus so much on, you're not doing what I told you to do. I mean, and I know that I'm rambling at this point, but I really think that we will make school more engaging, and if we make school more engaging, it's easier to teach kids that are engaged. Teachers will enjoy it more. That's why they got in. It's a service industry anyway. They came to serve people or serve their community. So I think that this is a great step, and I hope that we support this and continue to grow and try to figure out what that our daily desired outcome is going to be, or experience. Excuse me, I have to make sure my acronyms are right. But I think we're going the right way. We just need to keep it up.
I think also along with that, Clint, you just did a very good job of making sure that it is said about how we get to that road, because there's actually very few kids that are going to be on that road to where it would get to the county attorney. But it's how do you communicate that? I'm back to that communication thing again. How do you communicate that so that the parents really understand that that whole attendance thing isn't really about their kids. It's about others that may have that potential problem, and that what are all those steps that you have just said that are taken, before it would ever get to that problem. Because some of the things that has been told to me was like, well, gee, being that my kid had to take and go to Mayo for something or other, now next thing I know, I'm going to be charged and jailed. And so they're not really understanding that is a big leap. There's a lot of steps all between all of that, and that would most likely not be what their situation would end up turning out like. So it's how do we make that communication, even though it sits there in that policy thing, that just sits there. It doesn't really help the broader communication part of it. My thoughts anyway.
I have a couple requests.
Okay.
But you don't have to try to jot them down because I can email them to you too. But as we're talking about early retirement possibly being a discussion that we have, I guess things that were coming to my mind as we were doing that is, if we are at this table or even in a work session where we're having that conversation, I have questions about class sizes, current vacancies, and how that looks to long-term subs, projected retirements that we would assume. I'm guessing all of that will be here, but I haven't been part of those conversations before. And then what does our staff tenure look like? I think it's great to have all of the new hires and the student teachers that will be coming on board, but there's something for longevity and experience as well. So I would hate to push any of that out, but those would be questions that I would have right away in having those discussions. And then Mike had mentioned, the kids not wanting to come to school, how do we get them there? And then I'm kind of curious, in those attendance numbers, what does it look like versus elementary school, where many kids are responsible for getting themselves to school, but we can't put that weight on them either, versus a high school situation where kids are refusing. I think they're two different stories, maybe depending on the building we're looking at. So if we could just get some of that information maybe as further discussions happen there. So, that's it.
Okay.
Any other question? Okay, thank you. Those are all great questions. Okay, moving forward with our agenda, we move into possible action item. The following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless director so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. The items are 1. Minutes, 2. Bills and claims, 3. Employment recommendations, 4. Board policy with minor no changes required by law, 5. MOU with AIM, 6. Special education contracts, 7. Agreement with EEIC America Reads Work Study, and 8. MOU with EICC for college credits for high school students. What are the wishes of the board?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. So we move into, right now, into item J on our agenda. And item J is to approve the engagement letter with Piper Sandler for services as a placement agent for the proposed issuance of the school infrastructural sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds. What are the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve the engagement letter with Piper Sandler.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion?
So I'll just, essentially, you know, what you're seeing is kind of the next phase of the bond process. So, you know, on the one hand, as we get down to the contract with Russell Construction, as we work with architects, as we start having planning and design meetings, that's preparing for construction. And these next pieces are about preparing to pay for those projects. So Piper Sandler, they handle selling of the bonds, right? Ehlers and Cooney does the legal service behind it to make sure we're dotting all the I's and crossing the T's and so on and so forth. So that's what these next few items kind of set forth.
I just have to gripe a little bit, and it has nothing to do with just specifically Piper Sandler, but in the language of just darn near every contract we ever read, it always states that if we want to cancel the contract, the only way we can do it with Piper Sandler is if they were negligent. And at that point, then we are responsible for every single dollar up to that point. And then it follows with, but if Piper Sandler wants to get out of it, they just have to give us 30 days notice. How come we don't stick something in, okay, well, if you get out of it, then you also have to pay for us to find somebody else? I mean, where's the balance in that? Because if they do something negligent, we want to get rid of them, we got to pay them immediately. But if we don't do anything negligent and they just want to get out of it, then we're up a creek without a paddle. It's a personal thing. I won't say any more on it. You know, I still approve it, but I just wanted to gripe.
Any more discussion?
I mean, are these ever reviewed by counsel or legal?
They are. And again, these are pretty standard
Right.
contracts and
Very standard.
agreements.
Every one of them.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the engagement letter with Piper Sandler, please signify by saying aye.
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 Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Next item on the agenda is to approve the engagement letter with Ehlers and Cooney for legal services rendered as bond counsel for the school infrastructure sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds, 2022 series. What are the wishes of the board?
I approve the engagement letter with Ehlers and Cooney for legal services rendered as bond counsel for the school infrastructure, sales, service, and use tax revenue bonds, and make a statement that says that is not any Cooney relation to me. just for the record, because I actually asked that one night.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
And again, just to kind of go into these a little bit, so what we have approved, what you approved was selling bonds up to kind of a ceiling of, I think 32 million was on. We're really projecting about 25 million. So the way these are structured, we would sell $15 million in bonds in 2022. That'd probably occur in November. Then we're going to come back in January, because that'll be 23, and we'll sell another $10 million. So because we're keeping that at a $15 million threshold or below, it allows us to spend that money out through 3 years. If it's over 15 million, we'd only have 2 years. So just to be safe, the way they structure that is the 15 and the 10. And then again, we know costs are going up. So we have the potential in 24, if we need to, we could sell another group, and it might be 2 or 3 million in order to finish the projects out. So a lot of work done behind the scenes to kind of lay that out in the best way possible and the best advantage to the district to get the best interest rate and the most flexibility to get those dollars spent in the way that we've determined.
Okay. So all those in favor of approving the engagement letter with Ehlers and Cooney for legal services rendered as bond counsel for the school infrastructure sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds 2022 series, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. So moving forward, next item is approve the engagement letter with Ehlers and Cooney for legal services rendered as bond counsel for the school infrastructure sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds 2023 series. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make the motion to approve the engagement letter with Ehlers and Cooney for legal services rendered as bond counsel for the school infrastructure sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds for 2023 series.
Second?
Any discussion? Okay. All those of you who are in favor of approving the engagement letter with Ehlers and Cooney for legal services rendered as bond counsel for the school infrastructure sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds 2023 series, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Next item on the agenda is to approve the contract with Russell Construction for construction management services. What are the wishes of the board?
I make a motion to approve the contract with Russell Construction for construction management services.
Thank you.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
My basic thing is, I'm assuming since this is a 77-page document, is this a standard type of construction document?
It is a standard document. We did send it through our attorneys and went back and forth with Russell in order to make sure everybody was comfortable with it. And then again, what I can tell you with Russell right now, what they're working on is kind of reviewing the budget that, initially the architect kind of made some assumptions in budget. They're right now going through that to make sure, are we still on track from a budget standpoint, and also looking at timeline and how the projects lay out. So that'll be some of the first comment. There'll be, as we move through these next months, there's going to be ongoing reports to the board on kind of where we're at with things. Also, there's a portion of their services that will be pre-construction service. That means, meeting with community groups, meeting with, staff, talking about the design of things, the planning of things, to make sure that, again, as they go out for bid, like we are exactly where we want to be. And then from there, it becomes the on-site management to make sure things get done on time and on budget, so.
I just think that, with the number of projects we have going on, that this is going to be a tremendous asset to our district and to our staff. So I just, I'm on board totally with this.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the contract with Russell Construction for construction management services, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. So moving forward, we move into the discussion and information section of our agenda. And item A, review administrative regulations 1404.3R1, substitutes for teachers administrative regulations, and 2702.2R1, student fee and waiver reduction procedures. Any information, Clint, on that?
I would just say, again, if you see any questions or have concerns, feel free to let me know.
Any question on that? Okay. Item B, second reading of policies 100 mission statement. Any question on that?
Clint, the only question I would have with that is I saw that where we changed the board targets and goals, how is that going to affect our agendas and what we talk about? And it doesn't have to be answered tonight, but at some point it would be nice to kind of have an idea of like, that's always a bullet point for us. So if we take those out of this mission statement,
We just adjust.
then what's it
accordingly,
going to
but,
look like?
Keep in mind, you as a board approved the mission, vision, and strategic direction. So now we're just updating the policy around that as well.
Any other question? With that, we move forward to June financials, and Tom.
Okay, good evening. So tonight, we have the June financials on the board book, and our certified annual report is what I'll be presenting on tonight. September 15th, this report will be certified with the Department of Ed, along with our special education supplement and our annual transportation report, which I'll report on next month. So we'll just go through some highlights and some financial indicators, and I'll also talk about a slide from our health insurance committee meeting on our self-funding health insurance. So again, there's the agenda or the timeline of financial information that will be presented at future board meetings. Next month, we'll have action items regarding the special ed supplement and our limited English proficient allowable costs, along with the annual transportation report. So the first page, I've kind of summarized the general fund revenue and expenditures only, and given you a 3-year comparison to the last 3 annual reports. I will point out that you can see on line 10, our state aid revenue, AEA flow-through and categoricals has went down by 0.4% the last 3 years. However, our total revenues have gone up 3.8%, and a huge reason for that is our federal revenue on line 15. You can see our federal resources have gone up quite substantially, which we all know is because of the ESSER funding that we are getting over the last 2 years, and then last year, significant amount the year before that. Our total expenditures increased over the last 3 years by 3.6%. So I've summarized there again under those functional categories that I talk about every month, but this is just for the general fund. So then the next 2 pages are a couple financial indicators. The first one is that concept of spending authority, which is important to Iowa Public School Districts. Our general fund operates on the concept of spending authority. That is, our unspent authorized budget is the remaining legal spending authority at the end of any fiscal year. Maintaining adequate unspent budget authority provides a legal authority to spend any unassigned fund balance. And there's the formula, how it's calculated. And then I did pull out FY21 statewide percentages, and if you notice, Muscatine was at 18.4% at the end of FY21, probably around 20.7% at the end of 22 here. So we are, around the state average, at least as of FY21. And then we did increase our unspent authorized budget this year by, about, I'm trying to do math in my head here, so a couple $1 million, a little less than $2 million, right? So, big reason for that is the miscellaneous income that we got from the state, ESSER funds, and then obviously we weren't 100% fully staffed either during the year, so that makes a difference too in our actual expenditures. So the next page is our solvency ratio. You'll see there that this is just a snapshot, a point-in-time measure of any remaining revenue we have, assuming a district closed its doors on June 30th. And after, retrieving all of our revenue and paying all of our obligations, how much is basically left, and that is around 18.9% at the end of this 22. And you can see there that we're right under state average according to FY21 figures that we can pull off. So that is the calculation there. We take our unassigned fund balance plus our assigned, which we assign money for specific purposes like grants that we get. We just assign those fund balances for those purposes, and then we divide that there by our total revenue, but we have to subtract our AEA flow through. Technically, we don't get that money on our books, but we have to record it because they're not a taxing entity, so that just flows through. Revenue equals the expense. So our goal there is to be around, 5 to 15%, and I just will say that although we are on the higher level, we need to make sure we have adequate fund balance to get through the summer, because our revenue basically stops in June. I mean, we get our last property tax, we get our last state aid, but we still have bills to pay in August, July and August for that fiscal year. So. Then the the next page is just that bringing back that published, our actual expenditures to what's published, because that's a compliance area for the school board, and we have to stay within our published budget in those functional categories that are on the left-hand side there. And you will notice, I will point out that we amended our budget in May. And if you compare that to the total used, you'll see there that we did need to have that budget amendment for a couple of those functional categories. So we stayed in compliance with that. So any questions on the general fund or that budget part? So the next few pages, I just summarized those other funds that we have. The management fund, that's where we pay our property casualty insurance, liability, workman's comp, early retirement payments, that natural gas insurance that we have, and unemployment. Our revenues were down 19% over the last 3 years, but we knew that because the management fund is all property tax, and we have to look out at least 2 years on our needs for the management fund, because we need to have that cash in July to pay property casualty insurance is due in July. So we can't wait to get those property tax revenues in that fiscal year based on the timing and so forth. So So we knew that management fund levy we didn't tax for as much this last year, plus we didn't have an early retirement incentive. We knew we weren't going to have one and then obviously our expenditures are roughly the same, 6.7% increase. So The next page is capital projects, and I combined both of those together because we do have save funds and we do have physical plant and equipment levy funds, and I will just point out on line 1 and 2 there, that's the property tax portion, and then line 12, that is the state revenue from sales tax. So obviously sales tax revenues across the state are strong or have been strong, so we actually are receiving that is revenue received based on enrollment, but revenue has increased more than our enrollment has decreased, so we've been getting more sales tax revenue. And then we did have some donations this last year and the year before on line 8. Last year was that Carver, in fiscal 21 was the Carver donation, and then this last year we had some donations for the scoreboard project, and so the next page, just real quick, is student activity. That's another fund we have to keep track of, and this is just our ending fund balance. There is a breakdown of all those activity funds at the high school and the middle school, clubs, organization, and sports. Those are all have to stay positive, so that's just the summary of all the activity fund. And you can see that the revenues took a dive in 2020, 2021 because, COVID happened. There was a lot less activity. And so now that's kind of being built back up, I guess. So, yep. Next page is school nutrition. I will point out on line 15, our federal revenues, again, increased significantly over the last 2 years. And we basically have been receiving federal revenue year-round because Alicia's been, feeding 12 months a year almost, right? So we do get federal revenue for that. And that's going to look different this year because we're going back to the pre-COVID where, look on line 6 where 3 years ago our nutrition program sales were $450,000 or $470,000, and it went down significantly. Well, that's because the federal government started paying for all breakfast and lunches. So I will point out on line 38, the ending fund balance in the nutrition fund has increased significantly, and that's due to, I believe, the COVID or the federal revenue that we've been receiving the last 2 years. So that has helped the fund balance. And then, I don't have any other comments on that unless you have any questions on nutrition fund.
What do you do with that leftover money?
I'm sorry, what?
What do you have to do with that leftover funding?
It goes back into the program, into the nutrition program. So she could buy equipment with that for her kitchens or potentially a centralized kitchen or something.
Spend down date or?
No, there's no, I don't believe so, no. But okay, the last slide, if you recall, every other month I present their Fund 71, which is our self-funding and health insurance fund. So you kind of get a monthly snapshot of how that's doing. A week or so ago, the insurance committee did meet, and we were presenting a whole bunch of other slides. This is just the one slide I pulled out to show the board. So this is just a summary of July through June claims, and that stop loss reimbursements was because the school, we only purchase anything over $75,000 is there's other insurance to pay for those claims over $75,000. So that is how much we got back from paying those claims. Pharmacy rebates, and then obviously you see the net claims there. Our fixed costs, our total claims, the accumulated lives that are insured under our program. And then what's important to know is the claims per divided by the fixed cost per employee per month, the $900.74, and then that is compared to what we funded was that last figure at $1,030, and then what was projected when we started into this whole thing was $998. So we did better than what was projected and what we funded for the first year. So.
And again, just to reiterate, when the board made that decision, that first year is always, you're just not sure how it's going to go because you could have a bad year. And we had a history of good years here where based on, what Blue Cross Blue Shield anticipated we'd have in terms of claims, and that's what we purchased that full coverage based on, came in significantly better than that. When you're fully insured, that money ends up in the insurance company's pocket. As you go to self-insurance, the only difference is who's paying the claims. And again, we have that stop loss for anything that's over that $75,000 limit. The advantage of that is as you have those good years, that additional money stays with that fund balance. So that, again, for a second year in a row, we've been able to keep costs neutral, right? It gives you just a little more control as things move forward. And again, that money stays with the district as opposed to going to the insurance company. So it was a good move. We'll continue to watch that very closely, and we continue to have conversations about how do we make sure that we're as efficient as possible in this plan, because ultimately that's a benefit to all of our staff when we do that. So I appreciate all the work that Tom and his team has done. And, Holmes Murphy has done a good job supporting us through this process as well.
And don't worry, we won't forget about fiscal year 22 because audit season is right around the corner, and we'll begin that process soon after September 15th. And then we will bring, hopefully, the final audit back to you in February, if not sooner. But we still are thinking of FY22, but we're pretty much done. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any question for Tom? Okay, thank you. Moving forward with our agenda, we move into the announcements, meetings, and events. September 13th, 2022, Riverbend Mobile Food Pantry at the MCSD Administration Center between 4:30 and 6 p.m. September 15th, 2-hour early dismissal. September 16th, no school teacher in service day. September 27th, we'll have the joint council meeting, Muscatine School Board, Muscatine City Council, Muscatine County Board of Supervisors, and the meeting will be at the Muscatine High School Student Center at 7 p.m. September 26th to 30th, that will be the homecoming week. September 29, homecoming parade, and that will be at Grant School to start at Grant School to Muscatine High School at 6 p.m. October 10th, a school board community conversation at 6 p.m., and that will be at the lower level of the City Hall. And October 10th also, we'll have our regular board meeting at 7 p.m. here at the City Hall. Any other announcement? Okay. Can we have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. I assume no discussion here, right? Okay, all those in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay. Good night, everybody.